Hi everyone, let's carry on with interesting facts we discover about our life and the way we live. As I said before, all tools can ultimately bring both benefit and harm. But if we approach everything that happens in our lives correctly, again, correctly from the perspective of personal growth, then it's about accepting more and more of our own aspects and qualities. Usually, this concerns the quality of our personality and body, the quality of our space we live in, and the people around us. In other words, we are forced to accept all of this, not to endure it, but to truly accept it, as we've discussed. Simply because, first of all, we have no choice, and secondly, we actually need this ourselves, because it is through this that we grow. If there is something we don't like about ourselves, some trait we have, we consider it a bad trait. For example, exaggerated modesty, being too overweight or too thin, being too talkative, or anything else that seems too much to us. In other words, we do not accept these traits in ourselves. But some people might actually like these features in us. Maybe they will want to get to know us and love us precisely for that, and then, over time, unconditional love will emerge simply because you exist. But some people might not like it. In other words, some of us may not like certain sides we have. These are usually not the most pleasant qualities in a social sense. Public opinion says that these are not very pleasant traits. For example, things like grumpiness, criticism, judgment, if a person has too much of that. There are even various commandments in religions saying that envy is bad, and so on. There are a lot of things that are considered bad. Making love is bad, overeating is bad, this and that is bad. There are all sorts of things that are seen as bad. And we try to be good so as not to be bad because, God will punish us, people will punish us, you can't do that, that's not how it's done, it's wrong, and so on. But where is the inner sincerity? Who decides that this is actually wrong? Did anyone ever really look into this or not? Why did everyone suddenly decide that one thing was right and another was wrong? There are, obvious things, like just don't do harm to another person, don't intentionally hurt them, and so on. But at the same time, there is intention. So if you act out of good intentions, but it turns out that you end up causing harm, then it's not really your fault. And even if there is some fault, you shouldn't carry it around inside yourself. You need to forgive that too. And that too will become a trait that comes up. So things like resentment or self-criticism, blaming yourself, all of that. And you shouldn't hide these sides of yourself. On the contrary, you need to open them up, show them to yourself first and foremost, start to observe them, and not to be afraid to show them to the world. Then they dissolve more quickly in this space, then we live through them, and they no longer bother us. It stops being some kind of problematic area. And what's most surprising is that a person then begins to change from within because they allowed themselves to be that way. They no longer hide it, no longer conceal it. And moreover, they have come to love this feature in themselves. If you dig deeper into this, you'll see that, in fact, there is no such thing as right or wrong. As I illustrated with the example of the stew, it's a simple picture. In one case, something is good, and in another case, the very same thing is bad. I'm not trying to say that overeating is good, or that doing something else is good or bad. These are all very relative concepts. I'm simply advocating that we consciously look into the essence of things, rather than just blindly accepting what is good and what is bad. Of course, if we live in any country, in any space, in any society, then ideally, as decent human beings and out of respect for that space, we need to abide by the laws of that space. In every country we live in, each of us in our own, there is a set of rules and laws. As law-abiding citizens, in order to avoid consequences, we are compelled to follow them. If we break certain laws, we face punishment. That's the way it is. And whether it's good or bad, you decide for yourself. If that works for you, well, fine. Do it that way and accept the consequences. It's all very simple. So here, it turns out that we step outside the influence of these limiting patterns of behavior, thinking, and consciousness into a more expanded perception, where there is no good or bad, but that doesn't mean you become some kind of anarchist. Of course you don't. But again, in some cases it's right, in others it's not. It depends on how you look at it. There are all kinds of situations. And in the end, we will be forced to move beyond these limiting beliefs and accept all sides of ourselves and of this world. Any sides. Ultimately, you come to realize that you are nothing in particular. You're not any specific. I'm not just this good person. I'm not made up only of good qualities, and as for the bad ones, well, I want to hide those, right? I don't like them. Those are bad sides. I'm not happy with them, but I love all of myself. So, we should come, or rather, strive here, to the point where you realize that you are who you are, and you love yourself completely. And in the end, you are nothing specific. You aren't any one particular thing, because in one situation you're like this, and in another situation you're different. One time you cook stew with grated carrots, another time with sliced carrots. It's impossible to always be in just one position because the world changes, everything is constantly changing. If you get stuck in one way, you're doomed to be dissatisfied, to end up in some unpleasant scenario, inevitably, because everything is constantly changing. If you don't change, if you don't adapt to this, it's a problem. Things will really go wrong. And you don't need to go to clairvoyants or fortune tellers to realize this. Any conservative, sooner or later, will have to step out of their conservatism and discover something new, because otherwise he will die, he simply won't be able to interact with this world. There will be so much resistance and so many inconveniences that he simply won't be able to survive, plain and simple. It's like, let's say, a person from some ancient, isolated tribe, where even now they still run around with pierced ears in the wilderness, on remote, uninhabited islands, and bringing him to a major, bustling world metropolis without explaining anything at all, and just leaving him there, completely alone. He wouldn't survive. And if he did, it would only be because he adapted, learned to understand this new world differently, and accepted its unfamiliar rules of the game. But if he behaved exactly as he did back there, most likely it would be either extremely difficult for him to cope, or he simply wouldn't survive in these challenging conditions. He would be forced to adapt. I am reading out a comment right now, and the universe has its own rules. I adapt to all of them, but not at my own expense. Well, yes, exactly. So we are forced, well, yes, to adapt, to take things into account. So in the end, as I see it now, you have what you feel, how you genuinely feel. Not what you think, not what you understand, but what you actually feel. Because what we truly feel inside, when the heart opens, when you feel your soul, it moves in impulses toward where it needs to go. Your soul guides the process of development and the awakening of evolution. But you can't not accept it. Sooner or later you will have to accept it. Because otherwise you will live with a restless heart inside. Acceptance does not mean approval. That is, you can accept that this is how things are in this world. But look at how much is changing right now. Do you accept these changes? I accept all these changes, whatever they may be, whatever else may come. I know that I will have to accept it, and I will gladly accept it as much as I can, of course, as far as my awareness allows. But that doesn't mean that I will approve of it or think that there should be more of it, no. It doesn't mean that I will do the same myself, no. Acceptance means a calm, deep, and peaceful attitude toward it. But that absolutely does not mean that you will encourage it, approve of it, or even more so, somehow show that we should do more of this. Not at all. It's not necessary at all. But without acceptance, it will be very hard for you. Until you digest this, no deep awakening will happen. And you will have to do it. Trust my experience and the experience of many people I communicate with. Most of the people around me are awakened individuals. Dozens of people come to this realization, sometimes even at the same time. And everyone goes deeper and deeper. Apart from this, there's nothing else to do here. At some point, you will see this for yourself through your own experience. Not because someone told you or because you read it in some trendy book. That there is nothing here except this development through acceptance. And that is love. It is love for mistakes, for letdowns, and for those who start fights. And the absence of love exists only when there is a one-sided perception that it can only be this way and not otherwise, when you don't see things more broadly. It's because everything here is in its place and everything is needed. Not everything may be equally important, but everything is necessary. Every cog in this big, vast system, every person, every bird, every leaf, fulfills its function. Every event, everything created in this stew also serves its purpose. And all of this is absolutely necessary. And everything is in its right place. And when awakening happens, you'll see for yourself, and you'll laugh at how you used to think differently, at how you used to divide things into good and bad, at how you used to defend your rules and opinions so fiercely, almost hitting the roof. You'll laugh at all of that, because you'll realize that it was all just an illusion, which was necessary for your awakening, and for nothing else. And there's nothing else left to do here.